Today, I talked to one of the best, I hate to use the word, but hackers in the world. He is the guy that all the three-letter agencies use, all the top tech people, they call him in. And he's going to give you some amazing information today about your personal cybersecurity, which, again, it absolutely is within the realm of your self-protection. And it's getting more and more important that you understand what you need to do when it comes to cybersecurity. So, what's interesting is I have so many cool friends, and I don't mean that in a bragging way, that I get a call every so often. I'd been doing some research on some cybersecurity, and I have a very good law enforcement contact that I'm going to be bringing on later on. But I was talking to a very good friend of mine who's very in the know in Silicon Valley, and he said, "Oh, I've got somebody you got to talk to." And who was it? It was this guy. His name is Mike Damm. Now, that's just an awesome name. I mean, that is a freaking like action novel, name right there. And Mike's really, really cool. There aren't too many pictures of him on the internet. I had to grab this one, and he likes it that way. He is a very sought after individual. He has worked to go after bad guys. That's what his passion is, to absolutely go on and, in a cybersecurity world, go after the real scumbags that are out there. He's worked a lot with law enforcement. He's also helped famous individuals, protect their cybersecurity. Very well-known tech giants have employed him on a regular basis, and of course, the government has employed him on the basis. So I think you're going to really get a lot out of this interview, and there are actionable items for you to do on your own personal cybersecurity. So, without further ado, Mike Damm. Mike Damm, thanks so much for making time for this interview. It's really interesting when I was talking to our mutual friend, who's very savvy in a lot of different areas, especially when it comes to like crypto and a lot of the words, a lot of the IT issues, and very well connected in Silicon Valley. I was talking to him. I said, "Hey, my audience has really been asking about their personal cybersecurity, and is there anybody that might be a good person?" And I'm going to let you tell your story and your background. But when he gave me your background and everything, it was just amazing, and who you've worked. So I can't think of a better person to help the audience really kind of understand not only where their vulnerabilities are, but why it's important and why you need to pay attention to this. Because it is the one thing that I've seen I've seen businesses shut down via ransomware. I've seen people just, have stuff stolen from them because of password protections and things like that. So it's a very topical issue right now. And it's also one of those ones where the other thing that I liked about with our friend was he said, and he will explain it, to where your general audience can understand it. It's not going to, he can take very technical issues and make them very understandable. So with that, Mike, why don't you just introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So my name is Mike Damm. I've worked in cybersecurity. I always have to catch myself because I just say security, but it's cybersecurity for the last 20 plus years now, and I've built a bunch of really cool security stuff. I've built some security companies, sold some of those security companies, consulted with major companies that you probably would recognize the names of, and consulted with high net worth individuals on how to protect themselves and keep themselves safe in this ever changing landscape. The last 10 years or so of my career has been very focused on what we call offensive security, or if any of your listeners have like a military background, they'll recognize it as red teaming. And what that specifically is going and getting close to the bad guys, the actual threat actors that are doing the malicious deeds, and trying to learn from them and figure out exactly what are the tools they're using, what are the techniques, what methods are working for them and what aren't. And I collect that information and I bring it back to the organization I'm working for, and I'm able to then basically be a bad guy for hire internally. So we'll organize campaigns to launch phishing attacks or attempt to break into a building or something like that. And it allows us to level up the defenders, help them understand what they're doing that's correct, what they're doing that isn't catching the bad guys, how we're working around their defenses. Because you think about it, if someone goes in, robs a bank, that bank robber isn't coming back an hour later and telling the bank security staff, hey, you guys should probably upgrade your locks or train your tellers better, for example. So it's good to be able to come back in and have that frank conversation about what's working well and what isn't, and then we can level up the defenders and we can defend better. Um, in the process of doing all this, like I said, I gather a lot of information as to how real world attackers are doing their thing out there. And one of the things I like to do is take opportunities like this to share that information. If we can communicate how bad guys are doing the things they do and how they think, we can help make everybody safer and more secure.
Yeah. Who are the, you always hear that it's always outside players, that it's always other countries that are coming in doing this. You hear things like obviously Russia and some of that, but is a lot of this happening, like a lot of this happening, criminally within like the US? Is it the majority of it offshore? Is it, coming into the US when they're doing this? When you hear some of the attacks that you hear about, people, businesses being held for ransom and those types of issues.
The cyber crimes are very much a parallel to real crimes, and often there's overlap between these specific organizations. For example, um, there was recently a UN report that showed that theft of cryptocurrencies was helping to fund North Korea's nuclear missile program. And so you have professional criminals that are operating outside the United States, sort of outside U.S. jurisdiction. I'm not saying that there's no cyber criminals in the U.S., but you know, our domestic law enforcement seems to do an incredibly good job of catching these people. I try to break attackers down into there's really two main categories I've found. One is the true professionals. Like some people grow up to be bakers or plumbers. There's some people that are just destined to be criminals.
Right.
And those types of people are incredibly good at what they're doing. They're working for nation states or large criminal organizations, and they're conducting these large attacks, the ones that you see on the evening news, right? And then the other and the much more predominant vector is people that just have wealth or opportunity inequality. So if you think about places like Nigeria or India or something like that, where lacking other marketable skills, your best chance to make money to sustain yourself may be getting on the phone and scamming grandmas in the United States.
Right.
And in a lot of cases, if you can steal $100 from someone in the U.S., that may be life changing for them. And so it does primarily have an international nexus, but there are some domestic actors as well.
It's funny, we had a friend the other day, and it's random. I mean, she's an influencer, but all of a sudden her IG, her social accounts were just taken, just done. And the player, they thought it was I think out of Turkey was where they were saying it was coming from. But what's the goal? I mean, obviously they want her to pay and stuff like that. How does somebody like what is our, I guess a better question is, what is our vulnerability with the new world that we're in, the new world of smartphones? The fact that most of us have at least one social media account, data is being shared, our personal data is being shared all over the place. From everything that you're seeing, what does the average person know and not know what's being done, not only with their data, but their vulnerabilities when they start, using all of these apps in these phones, and the idea that you hear, well, if I just do a VPN, or if I have this, or if I have this little app, it'll protect me from everything. How vulnerable, if somebody was to be targeted, how vulnerable are you for the most part? What have you found?
Yeah, so there's two answers to that question. The first is how vulnerable you are, and then the second half is what exactly is it that they're looking for. In terms of how vulnerable you are, I like to equate it to, in the olden days, you would just remember, hey, I'm not going to go to the bad part of town. I'm not gonna put myself in a situation where there's a high crime rate or something like that. I'm going to be aware of my surroundings. When you start venturing online, and as our lives become more and more digital, it's there's no longer neighborhoods. There's no longer bad parts of town. It's everyone and all the criminals are all an arm's reach away from each other. So you have a lot more situations where uh, you know people will try and do targeted attacks, like it sounds like your friend was subjected to, of like, I bet they had a great Instagram username or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's what they were after, right? Because if you have a great Instagram username, that's something they can turn around and they can sell, or they can ransom back to you. um, and then there's just the broad overall attacks where it doesn't really matter who I'm targeting. I just need to target 10 people today, and it's just who are the easiest targets. And I think it's really important that we take the little steps that we can to not be the easiest but potential target out there.
Yeah, I mean, what's stunning is when you think about it, just walking around, walking around, me walking around with my iPhone. I've got financial information on here. I do banking on here. I trade crypto on here. I have all my personal messaging, my business, and I just assume, that everything's okay. Oftentimes, I talk to a lot of people that they're very savvy in many other areas of personal security. This is the one where they're completely clueless. And I think a lot of it is because people are just intimidated by technology. They don't think they're smart enough to understand, some of the basics. And I haven't seen too many really good, outlines outlines where you can just say, okay, listen, here's a checklist of, some of the basics that you should do. Understand that if I'm doing banking online, what are my vulnerabilities? And the other thing, Mike, is the password protections. You're using password services like, say, a LastPass or something like that, versus coming up with some variations of your own. Where are the vulnerabilities in those situations?
Yeah, so you touched on a really important thing there of as we continue to become more digital and a cashless society, your phone really is your passport to the world. It's all of your banking information. It's all your personal information, and um, it's now like we're worried about, like, oh, is someone going to break into my house in the middle of the night and steal my money? Well, it doesn't really matter because your money is in an online wallet now, accessible through your phone. And so that's really what the attackers are going to be going after. And I think in a lot of the concepts that your listeners will be used to, of like how you're protecting yourself and how um, you're you're operating day to day. It's not necessarily that technology is that much more complex. You're applying the same basic principles, just in a different domain. And the thing I like to remind people is that um, much like a random violent crime or something like that, there's not much you can do after the fact, after the crime has happened. So it's all about your preparedness up front and how you act in the moment. um, and the if anybody takes anything away from this, it's when you're in a situation where you need to act in the moment, um, always be very conscious of what someone is saying to you and why they're saying it. I like to joke, someone gets a phone call from the IRS that says you owe them $10,000 and you need to do, these steps. Uh, the government isn't that efficient. It doesn't work that well. The IRS is never going to call you. I don't know if you've ever tried to like call a government agency and actually
Right.
get someone on the phone, but it's impossible, right? So they're not going to be proactively calling you. Um, and so when someone sends you an urgent email or you receive a phone call that says Aunt Susie was in a car accident and needs money to pay a deductible so they can get emergency care, your initial response is, "Oh my gosh, I hope Aunt Susie is okay. Where do I need to send the money?"
Right.
Um, First, just stop, evaluate the situation, figure out exactly what's going on. Um, you know, Maybe Aunt Susie was on vacation, or maybe Aunt Susie is, staying with a friend. Can you call them? Can you verify this story? And just be very cognizant of the stories people are telling you. And I'm not saying be suspicious of everyone, but there's sort of this scale of the more extreme the situation, like I found bad guys will either use a tactic of fear, of like, oh, something really bad has happened either to you or to someone you care about and you need to rectify the situation, or they'll use greed and privacy. Like if you've gotten those emails that said, my uh I'm so and so, I have millions of dollars, I want to secretly give you some of it.
Yeah.
Those types of scams, be very wary of those. And there is never any situation where you should send someone gift cards or a wire transfer, or send them, like if you're trading cryptocurrencies, send them your cryptocurrencies. Like, it should be an immediate red flag. Anybody who's conducting legitimate business should be able to receive a wire transfer, or like something like that. So just be very aware in the moment, to avoid yourself, to avoid situations where you might get scammed.
Well, it's funny you're saying that. And I'm sure some people listen to that and go, "Yeah, the Nigerian prince and all that. I know all that. I know all that." What what I thought was interesting is are consistently changing. So yes,
Mhm.
I know about the old scams, but now, like, I'll tell you one recently. It's been happening, and it's gotten more and more sophisticated. Is I will get um, I will get things saying from a company, just telling me, "Hey, we're about to renew your charge again, and it's $372 or something." And you're like, "Wait a minute, what's this?" The whole thing, and the whole scam is obviously they want you to call up, and then they're going to try to verify your records or do whatever. But I'm pretty savvy to that kind of stuff, and that first one got me to at least look at it way more than just dismiss it, off the bat. So they do get more and more, sophisticated in how they do this. And it's interesting to see how effective it is too, and how much it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, the scams where someone's saying, "Oh, you just bought a MacBook Pro on Amazon.
Yeah.
Call this number to cancel this," and then there's this convoluted process through which they steal money from you. Um, and I recently found out through someone else's a story where, an individual was scammed, by way of, they had made friends with someone online, playing video games with them, and these scammers had established a year-long relationship with this person.
Right.
And after a year, they said, "Hey, so I work for this guy that has inside information on Bitcoin, like, which way it's going to move, whatever." And so he gave them $1,000. But then the amazing part is they gave him $1,500 back. And they showed, "Oh, hey, yeah,
Right.
I have this inside knowledge. I can make you money." And then, of course, once you get a 50% return in a week, you go, heck, and they sent him $70,000.
Yep.
And then, of course, that person disappeared. But yeah, they're constantly evolving, and the important thing is just always be, just a little bit suspicious, and be wary of situations where you're the one that's providing money to someone else.
Yeah. Um, so now, there's that aspect of it. And then of course, with the focus on this channel, a lot of it's self-protection,
Mhm.
and yeah, females, but also males that are facing either one, cyber stalkers, or they find themselves just being all of a sudden, their phones being, I guess cloned would be the best way to say it. What is, so for most people, the general public, for the most part, if you say, hey, I have an iPhone, they pretty much think they're completely secure from, those types of scenarios where somebody can actually be listening on their phone, stalking them, angry X or something like that. And the idea is that the Android's way more vulnerable, and
Mhm.
it's there. But what's really the reality? Like if somebody, like, I think people think if they can't get into your password, or they can't get in, they can't get into your phone, but there's lots of other ways. I saw other presentations where they can figure out ways to find out where you're at, what your phone's up to, and can you kind of share what kind of data is being automatically shared when you have an account with, like, T-Mobile or somebody like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Specifically on the topic of phones, because people ask me all the time, Android, iOS, what should I buy? What should I carry with me? Um, and I'm not particularly biased in this. I obviously carry one particular brand of phone, but the I like to back up these statements with data. And the most interesting data I have is that I've developed exploits for mobile phones. I know other people that have, and the going rate right now on the market is, if I have a full, very complete exploit chain for an Apple phone, that could net me anywhere from $1 million to $2 million.
Okay.
And if I have a full, that same exploit chain for an Android phone, I can sell that for anywhere from 50 to $150,000. And so um, it it sort of puts in context the effort and that an attacker would have to put into compromising those phones. And if you're doing independent journalism or speaking out against oppressive regimes or something like that, um, you know there's absolutely situations where foreign governments have spent $2 million to buy an exploit to compromise one journalist's phone. um, so nothing is totally secure, but um, the one is has a higher bar of entry than the other. You also touched on a very interesting point, which is it's called SIM swapping, where uh, I, as an attacker, I don't have to worry about breaking into your phone. What I could do is go to a Verizon employee or an AT&T employee that works inside the stores, has access to their internal computer systems, all that sort of stuff, and I can pay them a couple $100s, and I say, okay, here's Tim's phone number. Here's a brand new SIM card. Just move his phone number to this SIM card. And then if I try to conduct a transaction with your bank and they send, you get those codes, like text
Right.
message codes.
Yeah.
At that point, the attacker can start receiving those. So I highly
Do
recommend.
you still receive them? Like, do you know where all of a sudden, like, if you're waiting for a code, it just doesn't come?
So on the receiving side, if you're subject to this attack, what you'll notice is some carriers will send a message saying, "Hey, by the way, thanks for contacting us. We're moving your service to this other number," right? And then that's the moment where, you kind of go into the panic mode. You call T-Mobile or whatever, and you try to get
Right.
them on the phone. Um, but in a lot of cases, what you'll notice is just, um, "Hey, I haven't gotten a text message in a really long time, or I haven't gotten a phone call in a really long time."
Yeah.
And then you start looking into it and you realize that you don't have your phone number anymore. So absolutely call your phone company. And if you say the word SIM swapping to the customer service representative, they'll know what you're talking about. And just say, "I would like extra protections added to my account. they're not always default, but all carriers have them available.
Right.
For example, I use a particular cell carrier, and I called them up and I said, "Hey, I want these extra protections," and I had to give them an extra, basically a PIN code, and no one is allowed to modify my account without that PIN code. So, highly recommended for any of your listeners. Like, as soon as you're done with this, call your phone company.
Yeah, call phone company. That's an easy one right there.
Mhm.
So how vulnerable are you see people like everybody's using cloud storage, a lot from their phones and stuff like that. And people have had some really embarrassing situations where, private pictures and things like that have been down. How secure is using cloud storage for the average client? And this is all predicated with the idea that, for the vast majority of people, there's probably no criminal interest in what they're up to. It would be more, jealous boyfriend, husband, wife, or something like that. You're getting into that. But as far as just cloud storage, not only, for small businesses and stuff like that, I just see there's a lot of lack of security when people are setting these things up. And there have been some horror stories.
Absolutely. And, to the use cases, or use case is a bad word, but the particular cases you mentioned, it's not the cloud provider as a whole. It's not, Dropbox or Google Drive that's getting hacked. It's one person's individual account, and that is often, either someone that wants to do extortion, blackmail, or as you said, a jealous ex or something like that. And the best recommendations I could give is make sure you use a password manager, which is a piece of software that basically you remember one big long password, and then it remembers all your site specific passwords for you.
Right.
Always use a password manager. Make sure no two services are using the same password, and make sure that your passwords aren't, the name of your dog and the year that you were born, because as you said, like an ex or something like that, they're going to know, the common things that you try.
Right.
There's a great service. It's called haveibeenpwned.com or
Mm-hmm.
haveibeenowned.com,
Right.
but he has both domains. We could put that in the notes, but it's a kind-hearted soul that collects data from companies that have been hacked, and puts it into his database. And then you can go in, put in your email address, put in your phone number, and it will tell you, for example, hey, 3 years ago, LinkedIn got hacked and the passwords were stolen. So whatever password you were using on LinkedIn, you could just assume that the bad guys have. So don't ever use that password again anyplace else. And that's when you hear about situations where, for example, a celebrity has photos of them leaked on the internet, it's almost always one of two cases. It's password reuse, where, like the example I gave, their LinkedIn password was hacked and they were using the same password for iCloud.
Right.
Or it's a situation where they've called and they've contacted someone at Apple on the phone, customer service, and they've convinced that person, uh, I am Tim, and I need to reset my password. And the way that those attacks are successful is just through the general information that you have available about yourself on the internet.
Right. Yeah, and that's the interesting part. I mean, I've had people call. They'll call in and they've got the date of birth. They've got all the basic information. Which it is. If you haven't done it, it's amazing to put your name in and see what pops up. I mean, just randomly. We had taken steps to try to take our property off, and we did. We were successful in doing that. Kind of it was put to another corporation, but they were able to find ways around it. I know people that have been very good with their cybersecurity, but they were found out by people following their kids' accounts and stuff. Kids' social, and it was able to just go in. People just have to understand, like, it's not just you; it's your community around you that if they're vulnerable, if somebody's looking for information on you, you could be bulletproof personally, but they can still find out the necessary information from, family members, friends, or something that are, not as savvy.
That on the on the security side of the business, that's actually a technique that we use against the bad guys when we're hunting them down.
Yeah.
Is there's this guy in a foreign country, and he works for the government or something, and he's super smart. He doesn't have his last name on his social media profiles. He doesn't include his phone number. Like he's following all these sort of OPSEC procedures, but then he has a girlfriend that is posting photos of them hanging out at the club, and oh hey, we were at such and such bar last night, things like that. And so it's great that you mentioned the sort of like googling yourself.
Mm.
Um i i always recommend that to people. I've sat down with so many people, and you just uh so most web browsers have like an incognito mode or private mode, that sometimes you use to browse certain websites late at night.
Right.
But you open up that mode of your browser, that incognito mode, and that basically makes you a different person. You're not logged into any of the services, things like that. Open that up, go to Google, type in your name, your wife's name, your kids' names, your home address, put in your license plate number and see if like someone reported you as a jerk driving or something like that on some random website. Um, and being in that incognito mode, it gives you a view of what other random people will see without direct access to you.
Right.
So then if you click on your Facebook profile and you see that it lists your phone number, you then know you need to go into your Facebook profile and you need to correct that security setting of that attribute. It's also, as a professional that investigates bad guys, um, there's so much valuable information to be found on the fifth, sixth, seventh page of Google search results, where like nobody ever goes there, right?
Right.
But when you're trying to find out someone's the street they grew up on, because that's the security question at their bank.
Right.
You just keep going deeper in the search results, and then at some point you find an old Facebook comment, or something like that gets you that information.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy what it is, stuff like that. And it's so funny. Like I heard you say something about names of dogs and year born stuff, and I'm laughing because yeah, in the past I have done that. I switched over to password manager a while back, and that's just made my life a lot easier. Um, how often should you do, again, without any provocation, there's no, nothing's going on, but how often should somebody, check their cybersecurity, and just what kind of random I mean, you did a good one just there with the Google search. What other things should people look at as far as their own personal security? A lot of times people will come in and they'll have their internet set up, and I know I was bad at it, keeping that equipment up to date, and keeping the latest downloads for the routers and stuff like that. And can you kind of talk to that level of how you can be exploited criminally if you have old versions of software that doesn't have the new updates, the security updates?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Um as our lives become more digital, we're surrounded by all these things. You have printers, your TV is connected to the internet, and there's been a lot of cases where um, someone i- someone's attacking you and breaking into the devices in your house, and you may not necessarily know, but your smart TV, for example, could be launching uh, a an attack against Ukraine because it was compromised by a Russian state actor, right? They've just figured out, hey, we're going to take all this brand of TV, exploit them all, and then take down some government website. So I generally tell people,
Well, people just that
yeah,
alone, like people right now, I can hear it. People are going, what do you mean? What are those appliances? How can you aggregate them and use whatever that is against something, without knowledge? Like, can you kind of explain a little bit what that process is?
Yeah. So attackers will do one of two things. They'll either say, take your smart toaster or whatever random devices you have in your house, and they'll use that as a sort of a relay. So you remember like the old spy movies where they were like bouncing the phone call off
Right.
satellites and all
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. It's the same general technique. As a bad guy, I connect to your device in your house, and then I go hack some business or something like that. And then ultimately, when say the FBI gets involved, they have the address of that of the internet address of that computer. They show up at your house and they're asking, hey, why were you hacking into this nuclear power plant? And
Oh.
the only answer you have is, well, I guess I should have installed software updates. The other is sort of a volumetric attack where they'll compromise, say, 10,000 devices across the internet, and they'll just program them to send a flood of traffic to a particular website that they want to knock offline. And this happens usually with extorting some sort of a ransom. Like if there's a big target of this is like online casinos,
Right.
because they have so much money to lose if people aren't there playing. They'll use your TV to send a flood of traffic to an online casino, and then try to extort a ransom from that casino. So you're not even necessarily losing any money. You'll just notice that your internet's a bit slow, or your internet seems to not work anymore, and it's because that device is then part of that like botnet. Um, so what I recommend people do is twice a year, when you remember that old thing, if you're supposed to change your smoke alarm batteries, when there's daylight savings time,
Right.
twice a year, um, wander around your house and just look at stuff and figure out, okay, well, that thing in the corner, I remember that pet camera that I got for Christmas 2 years ago. I wonder if there's a software update for that. And just, it's as easy as open up the app that it came with, or like your TV, just hit the remote, go to the settings is usually where it is, and there will be something that says updates. And if that's in there, just hit it. A lot of times it'll say, nope, you're up to date, you're good. Or it'll say, hey, there's 400 pending updates, would you like to install them now? And then you
Right.
just smash that button and update them. And then as people are practicing the your other competent skills, if you're going and practicing judo twice a week, or you're going to the range every weekend and practicing shooting, um, recognize that you're much more likely that someone's going to try and steal the money out of your checking account than you're going to be physically attacked at this point, because it's
Yep.
it's such an easier attack to launch. So think about, maybe once a month, I'm just going to go on YouTube and I'm going to look up cybersecurity videos. Like, I have a particular question of like, yeah, I wonder if it's safe to really do this thing online. There's a lot of helpful information online. Just, dedicate some time and resources to education and learning, and developing up that skill, because I'm sure a lot of your listeners have that protector mentality of like, I want to protect my community, the people around me. You may be faced with a situation where the old lady across the street comes over and says, hey, can I get a ride to the grocery store? I need to buy a bunch of gift cards. And you will have learned about, these gift card scams, and you'll go, hold on, let's sit down and talk about this, instead of just being the helpful neighbor that gives them a ride.
Right. Yeah, and that's you really made a great point. And because the likelihood is that, and for two reasons, I know, just from the law enforcement side and the people that I talk to for the online crimes, that organized crime recognized a long time ago that this was a much better way for them to go, and they've invested a lot of technology in it. One, because even if they are prosecuted, it's considered a white white collar crime. So
Mhm.
again, like the actual physical attack aspect of, say, a robbery or something. Not that that's not a possibility, but it's much more low risk for them to do it from an online sense. And they have access to things that 15 years ago you'd have to physically have access to them, and they can do it just sitting behind a monitor with a keyboard.
That's right. It's an attack they can launch from halfway around the world. And I mentioned earlier, local law enforcement does or federal law enforcement does a great job of protecting us from the major criminals, the large criminal gangs, things like that. But um, some of these bad actors have discovered that if I go steal $10 million from a particular organization, um, the FBI is going to get involved. They're going to come after me.
Right.
Um, if I instead go steal $100 from 10,000 people, um, I'm still making a decent amount of money, but those $100 crimes are being referred to local law enforcement, and local law enforcement just doesn't have the resources to
No,
investigate those issues.
no, they don't. And where would you that's great, because it leads right into something that I wanted to get your opinion. You're obviously on the cutting edge. You work with a lot of large groups. You work with a lot of government groups. And you've consulted for some very influential people. Where do you see the overall, like, what are your concerns as far as the competency for, like you just identified, like a local law enforcement can't keep up. They don't have the ability to, they can't train their people up that, or it just hasn't become a priority yet. And so there seems to be like this threshold vulnerability of, if they just keep it at a certain level, they can literally, through just sheer volume, collect a lot of cash, and there's really no recourse for that. Where are the failures when it comes to uh, current law enforcement, protocols coming after? I know what you're saying as far as, like, it's kind of like kidnapping. It's really stupid to kidnap within the United States, because there's the FBI is very, very good at shutting that down. And the repercussions of that, I'm sure it's probably similar. Like, to operate cybercrime within the United States is probably much higher risk. But what's interesting is, these same groups, as soon as they find, like, my friend, as soon as it was identified it was Turkey, it's like, that was kind of the response was, can't really do much, and I just think it's important. People need a motivation for taking these, biannual steps to do basic cybersecurity and get a basic knowledge of it. Um, they are, if it, I haven't known anybody that, if they haven't received a real attack, it's just floored them, and it's caused all sorts of issues, identity issues, identity theft, all of that stuff. Legal documents being forged, and, assets being literally just, taken, because they have all this information they were able to get.
Yeah, I think the good news is that it's getting better. Um, if you look at what happened in the United States post 9/11, we developed law enforcement fusion centers where local law enforcement had access to special investigators for counterterrorism and things like that, where we sort of built these little bastions of well-resourced federal law enforcement that local law enforcement could go to. And you know in in the wake of that event, we really got a lot better at dealing with potential terrorism threats and things like that. Now that we start to see things like the Colonial Pipeline hack, where a foreign ransomware group basically shut down gas pumps, um, I think that was really the moment where the federal government realized we need to extend those that we need to basically have that same process where we extend those resources out. And we're starting to see cybercrime experts, cryptocurrency experts being deployed into these fusion centers to help local law enforcement and help them to escalate. And the creation of national task forces. You'll have for example, there's like auto theft task forces that do a lot of work, not only in domestic auto theft, but they're also trying to track um, the movement of stolen vehicles internationally, so that because that's where a lot of high-end stolen vehicles get sold. Um, creating those same type of cyber units that are not only trying to mitigate the attacks domestically, but also trying to track and stop the transfer of funds internationally. Because if you can make it not economically feasible for the attackers, um, they're much less motivated to do it.
Yeah, they're going to go elsewhere because they're not looking for a challenge. They're looking for, fairly easy way to, exploit, something like this. Yeah, I don't know how much you've delved into this, but the other interesting part for me, it's horrible, but I mean, I can't believe how much stuff like human trafficking, pedophilia, all of that's moved online. It's funny you're talking about the Fusion Center. My wife's senior chief out here a chief of police out here in Vegas, and one of the divisions that's under her, at one time was the sex, crimes unit, and they had 16 investigators at the time working on it. And it got to the point to where when they triage these out, they're so overwhelmed that it was said essentially, they had to do an age cutoff because they had everything from infants to 4-year-olds. They were overwhelming. They couldn't even get to the older kids at that point. And they were just trying to, they're really just trying to triage everything. And it's amazing how much that has moved online and how sophisticated they've been, and also the recruiting. We see kids in high school recruited into human trafficking situations and all of that, and that's keeping an eye of what your kids are up to has never been more important online and never more challenging for parents.
Yeah, I think we're sort of at this interesting crossroads where ultimately privacy is going to become the most valuable thing that we have down the road, right?
Yeah.
It's your ability to have private conversations and your ability to, you know, conduct transactions privately and things like that. As eh, the bar continues to be lowered to the point that everybody sort of has access to all the information. It's the things that you're able to communicate with privately is going to be the most valuable things. And how do you balance that need for privacy with as you mentioned, child exploitation and human trafficking and things like that? And that's this was it's a common case within law enforcement where you have these, I mentioned, for example, iPhones are extremely locked down. How does law enforcement gain access to an iPhone? And there's definitely situations where you know you can stop the hypothetical terrorist attack, or you can rescue a bunch of kids by being able to law enforcement to get into that phone. But then there's also plenty of situations where we have to recognize this. It's the same iPhone that you and I carry is the same iPhone that someone in Saudi Arabia carries, and
Right.
their local police don't have the same,
Yeah.
the same, restrictions that we do. They may be looking for, oh, you said something bad about the government.
Right.
Um, and unfortunately, we're in a situation where we have to find a solution that works for everybody. So, to your point, I think parents, it should be abundantly obvious at this point that they should be monitoring what their kids are doing online. Um, and uh, the I joke with my friends, the death of a social network is always when parents join.
Yes.
If you look at the progression of like everybody was on Facebook and the
Right.
parents got on Facebook and then everybody moved to Snapchat and then so on and so forth. And now I think we're on TikTok, right?
Yep.
And so it's once the parents are there to kind of supervise the situation, that's when everybody moves on to the next social network. And so being aware of the latest trends and knowing what networks your kids are on, um, and just being very honest and very frank with them and saying, look, I know you're going to post photos online. I know you're going to hang out with your friends and share stuff with them online. Um, let's compromise. Like, your friends know who you are, so don't put your last name on your social media profile.
Right.
Um, don't have you know don't have the name of your high school or the city you live in your username, like little things that you could do like that, where without scaring them, explain the dangers of sharing this information. And I think now we've come far enough where there's plenty of example cases that you can point to where people lost out on college scholarships because of something they said when they were 13.
Oh yeah.
And if you can show those cases to your kids, you can help them, enable them with the tools where they can think about the things that they're sharing and that they're posting.
That leads to another thing. The idea of when you delete something, is it deleted? And that's something that I'm sure when you're doing investigations on bad guys and stuff there, but I can't tell you how many people have been shocked, especially in court cases, where phones have been requisitioned and then stuff that had been deleted is found very easily and put back up. What is once you have posted a picture, once you have done something, you've it's out there, it's been distributed amongst the web or whatever. What is the reality of deleting information? And again, and I realize that with some of this stuff, it will require a true desire by somebody, and financially, it'd be probably very expensive to do this. But if somebody really wanted to know, have you truly deleted anything in the way you'd think? We think it's like it's ripped up, burned up, boom, never see it again.
Right. Yeah. We think of it as being like physical paper, or like,
Absolutely.
on Windows 95, when you drag the thing over to the little recycle bin and
Yeah.
empty the recycle bin and it was gone forever. Right.
Mm.
But when you post something online, there's three places that data goes. It goes to the provider you're sending it to. So if you're posting it to a social media network, obviously they have a copy of it. They're storing it within their systems. There's also the people that are viewing that content. So if you share something on social media and someone sees that and they screenshot it, they obviously then have a copy of that. But there's also just without getting overly technical, like when you're browsing through Instagram, it'll in the background save copies of those photos so that you don't have to download them multiple times if you go back and look at them.
Right.
And in the case of law enforcement or forensic investigation, if you posted someone on something online, someone else's phone that viewed that content, that information could become accessible to law enforcement or something like that, where now it's stored on the viewer's phone as well. The third is companies that have made a business out of aggregating things that you may delete later. There's, especially in the security space, we have a lot of companies that do intelligence collection, where if you post a tweet about hey, I'm going to go down and I'm going to protest this particular thing, um, law enforcement most likely then has an aggregate copy of that tweet at some point, because it was detected to have a sentiment that was potentially you might cause a conflict or something.
Right.
And then there's also companies that will just collect photos, for facial recognition and things like that. And so when you go and you hit that delete button, what really happens is within the provider system, they're marking it as deleted. So they're just kind of like adding a little checkbox on the corner that says, okay, we won't show it to you anymore. It's not in the sense that you or I think of where it's actually destroyed. And that's just kind of a function of how large computer systems work. It's really hard to delete something. Um, and so law enforcement can always come back, get that information later. Sometimes it's stored, in caches or on other people's phones or data aggregators. So the best strategy is always just be very cognizant of the things that you're posting in the first place.
Right.
Because, as the old saying says, it's really hard to put the genie back in the bottle.
It's funny, a different take on that is, I know just from the law enforcement side, but both sides, people are being told if they want to be really secure in their communications, like one of the most secure ways to talk to somebody where it's extremely difficult for people to listen in on you or intercept is FaceTime, like a FaceTime video call between two people. That's one of the more secure ways. And then my next question, my follow-up to that is, what is your opinion of all the encrypted apps, things like WhatsApp, Signal, what's the other one?
Signal, Wicker, Telegram.
Yeah, Telegram, yeah. all those. What's your opinion on those things?
So as a
and the only reason I'm saying this is I literally have friends that are in very interesting places right now, and it's amazing. They won't send me a message on a normal message or anything like that. But boy, they're really free. I'm actually worried about some of the stuff they share with me. There are some sensitive areas there, but they feel very comfortable. They don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, I think it's, at the end of the day, it's who are you defending against and who are you protecting against. Right. Any of the so-called secure messaging tools, be it Telegram, Signal, FaceTime, as you mentioned, FaceTime video and audio calling, those are going to be safe against 99.9% of the threats that you have to worry about. It's you're getting into the either you have a government level actor, that's really interested in that, for example, that Telegram conversation you're having, or it's going to be a fundamental failure of the platform as a whole. For example, a group figures out how to compromise software X, they're going to exploit that in bulk and collect as much information as possible. As with all communications, ultimately the biggest weakness and the biggest vulnerability is the other people that are within that conversation. Right. And when say you have a group chat and you're talking about we're going to trade knowledge on what cryptocurrencies to buy or something like that. If you have 10 people in that chat, that's 10 physical devices you're trusting. And, like maybe one of those devices has, parental control software installed on it that's monitoring all that stuff, right? So, as always, don't say things that you need to be super secret. Especially putting them into digital devices. I know a lot of people that work for, alphabet soup type places and do scary things in foreign countries. And yeah, I mean, there's those communication platforms that they'll use, and they'll refuse to use others. Yeah. And I think that's very valuable information. I don't want to go as far as recommending any one particular platform, right? Just because if somebody listens to this in 2 years, the information may dramatically change.
Right. No, and that's good to know. I mean, just things for people right now, just knowing like if they're worried about somebody listening in or something. They're not worried about a physical device. It's listening to them. Right. But if they're worried about somebody might have access, to a phone or coming in, just something as simple as using, FaceTime audio or something. Yep. Like you said, if you can protect yourself to the level where it would have to be a government level, interest in you, well, then you're doing other things, at that point. Yep. So, but as far as your own personal security, that's about as good as you can get,
Yeah. don't make regular phone calls. At least use a third party app,
Yeah.
like Signal or Telegram or something like that,
Right.
or use the FaceTime audio call. um, and don't send text messages. Like at this point, it's, I think, like, you have to go out of your way to actually send a regular text message anymore. But don't communicate information over unencrypted channels.
Yeah.
Regular voice regular voice calls, regular text messages, things like that. At least step up to using some sort of a service that says, at least on the outside of the box, we do encryption.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really, really good info. Mike, if you were, if you were to provide just an overall view, how do you feel? People obviously, they lament, oh gosh, with death of privacy and all of that. But what do you think? I see this as just a new transition into just, this is the reality that we're going to be living in. I grew up at a time before the internet, and so I can see the changes, but I see a lot of people wishing for things to be different. They go back to the old ways, which is not going to happen. What's your How do you feel about the future? Are you feeling optimistic about things? I mean, because you look at it from both sides. You look at it from the proactive side, and you also look at, you're hunting bad guys all the day, and through those lenses, how do you feel about the current state of technology and cyber, and the general public safety, and just worldwide? Some of the things you're seeing. Are you seeing this to be far more likely that this is where the wars are going to be fought, and this is where the criminality is going to be focused on? And you said we're getting better, but is it just going to be this constant back and forth technical battle?
Yeah, I think, you and I are old enough to remember the time before the internet, and but we're not old enough to remember, for example, the time before telephones.
Right.
And previous generations, as technology came about, they were like, wow, you have the ability to transmit radio transmissions, or you have telephones, or I remember uh hearing this story. I don't know what the truth behind it was, but someone saying, well, we can't have cars that drive faster than a certain speed because people won't be able to breathe because the air doesn't move that fast, right? And
Right.
so new technology is always going to be scary because we don't know where it's going to go. And personally, I'm very optimistic for the future. I think that we're heading in the right direction, and we're making people's lives better. Um, and we're enabling so many people, like, even unfortunately, even in the realm of crime, we're enabling people to at least be able to feed their families in some cases.
Right.
um, and as we move towards this globalization, we're creating a higher level and a higher standard of living for everyone. um, and I think that technology is going to be a big enablement in, for example, helping, people in other countries get immediate medical care. The fact that, like, I have an app on my phone that literally alerts me when someone nearby, they've called 911, they need someone who knows CPR. And
Wow.
the fact that we have that technology, and I could just get an alert on my phone that says, hey, CPR, go to the other side of the mall, there's someone that needs CPR right now. Right? Like,
Yeah.
it's the amazing things it's doing for people's lives. um and I think, as with any new technology, we're discovering the things where we've gone wrong, the things we need to get better at, and we're progressively working on fixing those things. Especially within the security industry, we're trying our best. People, people often joke like, oh, like Google spies on everything you do.
Yeah.
I worked very closely with the security team at Google, and I can tell you on the inside, all they're worried about all day long is how do we protect people's information and how do we keep them safe and how do we keep their communications private. So I I was a really long answer to say I think I'm very optimistic towards the future, and I think it will get better.
Well, just a last question, because I just remembered there was a question that was submitted that I didn't ask specifically, but along those lines, you worked with Google. What is it's not a Google question, it's just a general, like when you see like all the the devices in the house, like the Alexas and stuff like that, what are people um lazy in the way they set those up? They're extremely convenient. I've seen people go in there, but of course, you do hear some of the people that have been able to be exploited, with that. The idea of a smart house being set up, is there anything people should be concerned about when they set that up? If they're provided, because a lot of people, it's funny. Obviously, you have a competent installer who's really doing a true job. Normally, they take care of that aspect of it, and they'll be there. But a lot of people are setting up their own houses. A lot of this stuff is just plug and play now, and people are just doing it themselves. Are there some things people should be concerned about with those types of devices?
Yeah. So one of the things I do personally is, I bought a new router. There's the new Wi-Fi 6 coming out. It's super awesome. It's be very fast. I put in my new router. The thing I did is I kept my old router, and my new router is named after one of my dogs, and my old router is named after my other dog. And as I'm connecting random devices, like say like light bulbs or things like that, maybe they need access to the internet but they don't need access to the data on my personal computer or my laptop, I just connect them to the old wireless. And if you just have two, say like Linksys routers or whatever, for the most part, they're segmented from each other. It's almost like building two physical networks.
Yeah.
And just don't give things access to your entire home. Put that random dog camera on your old Wi-Fi router. Keep that around. And as we discussed earlier, just make sure you do lots of software updates, things like that, to keep those devices up to date. And if you can, spend the extra few bucks for a name brand.
Yeah.
There's plenty of cheap devices on Amazon, and in a lot of cases, researchers have discovered that those devices ship with backdoors built into them,
Yeah.
or they ship with malicious software already on them. There was one particular case where someone was buying laptops in bulk, installing malicious software on them, and then re-shrink wrapping them and selling them on Amazon. So when
Wow.
you open up that new laptop on Christmas and you start putting in your credit card information, they've already, like, through no fault of your own, they've already compromised it. So buy from reputable sources. If you're going to buy a MacBook, go to the Apple store. If you're going to
Yeah.
buy a Windows PC, go to the Microsoft store.
Yeah, it's so funny you're saying that. You think like the ease of buying online. You think that's the way. Now you can directly buy online to those places,
Mhm.
but it's so funny how people will default to Amazon's just such the behemoth, and I see people all the time, especially when they get really price sensitive, when they see something that's way cheap compared to what it should be. That's usually a huge red flag, and not enough people really take that type of precautions. They'll just get something, they'll think it's actually a knockoff device that, like you said, could have malicious software in it, and it could just be a nightmare. But
Yeah.
that's great advice, actually.
I recently helped someone with they were doing some sensitive work, and so I got them an assortment of cell phones, and I, like, in my shop, I took the phones apart, physically took the cameras out of them, physically took out the microphones, things like that. And I'm not saying that's something that your average person can do, but what the average person can do is a piece of duct tape. If
Yep.
you have a Alexa screen or a Facebook portal or something in the house and you're not actively using it, just have, a tiny little inch long piece of duct tape or whatever, stick it over the camera, and you've now defeated any video surveillance in your house.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a little thing that I was doing that, God, about 3 or 4 years ago. I started doing that because one of my other friends, said the same thing. And I can't tell you how many people were telling me I was paranoid, and but I travel a lot. I travel internationally a lot. And it was amazing how many people just assume that, oh, well, unless the little dot's on, it's not on. And it's like, no, that's not true. We've had cases where people just completely were compromised. You just with devices just literally remotely just tracking them and just remotely filming them. It's amazing how easy that it is to do. Like you literally can defeat it with a piece of duct tape.
Yep. Yeah. The $20 baby cameras that you buy on Amazon to keep track of your kids, it's the same thing happened in the 90s with the audio baby monitors. People figured out that you could, go through a neighborhood with a radio scanner and listen in on baby monitors. Baby cameras are the new thing, and it's inconvenient to cover those up. But again, it's the type of situation where if you just buy a slightly more expensive model, make sure you change the default passwords on it, things like that. You can make those tiny steps to make yourself safer.
Well, this has been outstanding, Mike. What would just currently, what have you seen in the industry with ever since the pandemic? And now we're coming in, we're transitioning now kind of out of the pandemic into, obviously the concerns over in Eastern Europe. Um, have there been big changes in the technology world, as sort of in the cybersecurity world during all? I mean, there's so many scams that were going on during the pandemic and everything. Did things really ramp up with everybody home and everybody online? And is the go forward a lot more challenging? Because and I guess I'm saying this because I saw a lot of customers on my end who were technically just really not savvy. Now they're doing everything on their phone. I mean, my mom and dad are in their 80s and they were ordering Uber Eats and they were doing all this other stuff they never did before. And are you seeing just a lot more activity across the board?
Yeah, the pandemic specifically created, basically a target-rich environment where you have a lot of new internet users or people that are, starting to do many more things online. Like during the pandemic, I got a phone call from my father, who's been a mechanic his entire life, and he called me up and said, "Yeah, I got a laptop, I got it hooked up, and I went on eBay and I bought myself, a new radiator that I needed to fix up this car." And I'm like, "Wow, Dad, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you." But then in the back of my mind, I'm going through all the like, man, what happens when he, gets scammed, through
Yeah.
PayPal or something like that, right? So, um, one of the other interesting things that happened was, traditional crime became a lot harder. And so your organized crime groups shifted so much of their resources and their efforts into cybercrime and fraud and things like that because, um, just like any other business, they're trying to stay afloat. And they're realizing like, hey, we have all these new people online. And we have all these opportunities to extort people for money, things like that. Let's double down on this. And so it became uh you know a whole new frontier of just uh the innovative attacks that were taking place, and all the new targets. You mentioned the situation that's going on in Russia. Like, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, I had so many people reaching out to me saying like, "Hey, what do I need to do? Do I need to, like, obviously buy masks, but like, do I need to buy a ventilator? Do I need to like
Right.
people were trying to figure out, what do I do? What do I, how do I prepare for the situation? And I think as we go into sort of the next phase of warfare where, we're still going to have kinetic, bombs and things like that, but so much cyber warfare takes place to soften targets ahead of time. Um, there's so much that you could do to protect yourself that we've talked about, but there's also just the real world protections that you need to take into account. um, you know, do you have food? Do you have water? I think most of the world most of the United States discovered what happens when they stop selling toilet paper in the
Yeah.
stores, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a stash of toilet paper somewhere? And I'm not saying going to the extent of hoarding, but just, do a mental exercise and think about, like, what would I do if the grocery store was closed for a week, or what would I do if the power was off for a week? And in some cases that could be the result of cyber warfare. It could be ransom against your power plant. And as we saw in Texas, it could just be the result of sometimes bad things happen.
Yeah.
So make sure that you're prepared for the computers to stop working.
Yeah, that's key. I see so many people that if they didn't have, well, when they didn't have it, they were clueless. They had no idea what to do. I mean, and it's funny, stuff that, a couple of years ago, what you just said, you'd be listed as a prepper and kind of crazy. It's now the norm. I mean, I see people that never were like that before. They're buying generators for their houses. They're really investing in the idea that, hey, I saw it firsthand. It actually, we were shut down. The supply chains were shut down. Law enforcement wasn't coming. We had power interruption. And they're now, it's just to go forward. I think this generation that experienced all of this, I think to go forward is going to be far more proactive and security minded about those types of items. And that's great. And then that's why this interview was really good, because you didn't try to make people have to become really experts at it. It's really, there's some straight up basics that you gave, and I'll make sure that in the show notes we highlight all of those when we're coming out. As a close, you gave the one site that you're talking about. Have you been owned? Are there any other resources that you would like to have people? And obviously, we're going to have any contact information for you in the show notes, but is there anything else that you think would be useful for most people when they're going to research cybersecurity? Are there any better places to kind of get some really good information?
Yeah, I'm not paid by these organizations or have any relationship with them, but one of the services, like the first thing I do is I always sign people up for, it's a company called Delete Me.
Mhm.
And if you're familiar with sort of the ecosystem of data brokers that are out there, the Experians of the world that trade entirely in your personal information.
Yeah.
um, Delete Me is, it's not cheap, but it's not super expensive either. I think it's like $100-ish a year. But what they do is they have sort of backdoor relationships with all these companies. They go around and they help remove your information from the internet.
Oh, wow.
And if you've probably stumbled across, if you've ever Googled a phone number, you find all those weird websites that are like,
Yeah.
pay us $1, we'll tell you who owns this phone number.
Right.
They go take your information down from all of those websites, and in a lot of cases, like as an investigator or as a criminal, those are the type of sites that you're using to get cheap access to data.
Yeah.
And it, it's a process. It'll take 6 months to a year before you really see results. But just as we discussed earlier, Google yourself and then try to figure out how to get rid of all that information. I think is the biggest thing. Um, and yeah, I'll see if I can come up with a great list of resources that we can put in the show notes. And
Awesome.
I'm also on Twitter at Mike Damm. Twitter is really the only thing I use. So,
Perfect.
if anybody has any specific questions, feel free to ping me on there.
Oh, that's great. Hey, I can't thank you enough for giving us the time and letting the audience just field some of the questions that they had for you. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure we're going to get a lot of feedback from this, and I'm sure I'll have follow-up questions for you. But, for today, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you so much, Tim. I appreciate it.
I had a great conversation with him. I really hope you enjoyed it. Mike's one of those unique individuals that actually is humble and very downplays who he is and who he works with. You kind of probably got that from the interview, but those items that he told you are incredibly actionable. Please make sure that you take it seriously, because this is where they're getting us now. They're really, really invading all aspects of our privacy, and this is where they get information. This is how they find out oftentimes how to hit your home. They'll get you financially, all of those things. So again, this wraps right into your self-protection. And if you're ready to put a self-protection plan together for you and your family, I created a really great training at timlarkin.com. Just give us your email, and you'll immediately start getting your first training right away to put together a self-protection plan that minimizes the chance of violence ever coming into your life, which is absolutely how you want to live your life. So please subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching. Tell your friends about this and share. Make your comments. Look forward to seeing you very soon in some live training. A lot of you have been asked about live training, and we're going to be putting out more information about the live training very soon.